I heard the shouts first, kids laughing, swings creaking, and then a loud thud like metal crashing into earth. When I stepped outside, I saw it, a full playground standing on what used to be my garden. No warning, no notice, just bright slides, and strangers trampling land my family owned for generations. My name is Eric, and 2 months ago, I inherited the last piece of land my parents left behind. A quiet corner lot that had been in our family for over 60 years. I wasn't rich, but that land meant everything to me. It was where I planted my first tree, built my first shed, and buried my dog, Max. I had just moved back in, hoping to finally restore the place after years of city life. But before I could even unpack, strange trucks started showing up. First came a concrete mixer, then a crew with power tools. By the end of the week, a jungle gym had replaced my mother's rose bushes. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't agreed to a single change. And yet, the HOA claimed they had full permission. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just confusion. It was something deliberate, and I wasn't about to let it slide. I marched straight to the cluster of workers and demanded to speak to whoever was in charge. That's when she appeared, heels on dirt, clipboard in hand, fake smile plastered on her face. "I'm Valerie Grant, president of the Oak Ridge HOA," she said, like that title made her queen of the land. I told her calmly at first that this was my property, not the HOA's. Her response? A smug chuckle and a rehearsed line. "Actually, our records show this lot falls under Oak Ridge jurisdiction. We had unanimous board approval for the community playground." I was stunned. "Oak Ridge jurisdiction?" I repeated. "This land has never belonged to any HOA. My parents refused every attempt to join your association for years. You've got the wrong plot." Valerie didn't flinch. "Well, maybe you're not aware of the revised property lines from last year's community vote," she said, flipping through pages I'd never seen before. "Everything's been filed. It's done." It didn't matter that I hadn't signed anything. It didn't matter that my mailbox had never once received a notice, a letter, a vote. According to Valerie and her board, my land was no longer mine. It was common space, now meant for HOA-approved amenities. I pointed to the old oak tree. That stood as the boundary marker since 1973, planted by my grandfather. "That tree marks the edge of our land. Always has." She smirked. "The tree is charming, but outdated markers don't override formal documentation." That's when the anger hit me. Not just frustration, but a deep, boiling fury. They had paperwork, money, influence, and a polished narrative. I had memories, history, and a gut feeling that something shady was happening. And the worst part? Everyone in the neighborhood seemed to be going along with it, enjoying their shiny new playground while I was treated like a bitter outsider. It wasn't just land they were taking. It was my right to exist on it. And I knew, if I didn't fight now, I'd lose everything. I spent that night tossing and turning, mind racing with questions and anger. If Valerie had official records, where were mine? The ones my father used to talk about, documents he always said were too important to leave in a drawer. At 3 a.m., I finally gave in and went to the basement, to the old storage room no one had touched since he passed. I started digging through dusty boxes, old tools, war medals, yellowed manuals until I spotted it. An old gun safe tucked behind a pile of paint cans. It still had his initial scratched into the side. I cracked it open with the code I remembered from childhood birthdays. Inside was a bundle of documents wrapped in plastic and a black-bound notebook titled simply, "Deeds and Boundaries." My hands were shaking as I flipped it open. Inside was a map, hand-drawn, stamped, and signed. It was dated 1956. It showed our land clearly extending 60 feet beyond the line where the playground now sat. But that wasn't even the bombshell. Attached to the back was a notarized letter from 1983, a legal addendum my father had filed to formally reject the HOA's annexation attempt. And there was the golden sentence. The estate of Charles Rayburn retains full private ownership, exempt from future Oak Ridge developments, unless otherwise signed by a direct heir. And I hadn't signed anything. Not once. That's when I realized Valerie didn't have new records. She had altered ones. The next morning, I went straight to the county office, took a number, waited 2 hours, and asked to see the most recent property filings on Lot 27B, my land. The clerk hesitated. There's some discrepancy with that lot. We've received 2 versions of the boundary map, one filed in '83 and another amended in 2021. I asked to see both. The older one matched my father's map perfectly. The new one extended Oak Ridge's property line right into my front yard, and it wasn't even signed by me. That's when the chill ran down my spine. This wasn't a mistake. This was coordinated. The HOA had filed fake boundary updates banking on the idea that no one would challenge them. Most people wouldn't even notice. But I did. I left the office with certified copies in hand. My father's map, the 1983 letter, the county's own conflict notice. Suddenly, I wasn't just a guy arguing over some mulch and monkey bars. I had proof. Real, legal proof. And I was ready to use it. They wanted a playground? I was about to give them a courtroom. I couldn't stop thinking about the forged boundary lines. If they faked that, what else had they buried? I needed to know how deep this rabbit hole went. I started with public land records, zoning permits, development plans, anything with names, dates, or signatures. Most of it was a maze of bureaucratic jargon, but then one detail jumped out. The signature on the 2021 boundary amendment wasn't just a forged version of mine. It had been notarized by someone named Laura Brink. That name sounded familiar. I checked my father's old HOA newsletters. There she was. Community Treasurer, Laura Brink. Suddenly, the notary was someone inside the HOA. I kept digging. Through the state's corporate registry, I ran a search on Valerie's full name, Valerie Sutton. And that's when everything started to unravel. She wasn't just the HOA president. She was listed as a managing member on 3 different LLCs: Greenhaven Development, Ridgepoint Property Group, and something called Oakhurst Lifestyle Partners. All of them were connected to recent land acquisitions. And get this, Greenhaven had received 3 contracts in the past 2 years to revitalize community spaces in Oak Ridge, including that playground. So Valerie was greenlighting HOA projects that funneled money into companies she secretly owned. I pulled their financial disclosures. The HOA had voted to allocate $112,000 for the new playground. The vote wasn't even unanimous. It was pushed through by a proxy system, where people who didn't attend meetings had their votes assumed in favor. And the kicker, Greenhaven charged $58,000 for the playground equipment, most of it secondhand and bought at auction for a fraction of the cost. They marked everything up nearly 400%. She wasn't just stealing land, she was laundering money through fake upgrades. I talked to my neighbors. A few remembered signing petitions years ago to oppose rezoning, but nothing ever came of it. One elderly couple, the Thompsons, said they'd received letters threatening fines if they questioned HOA changes. Another neighbor, Jake, said he'd been fined $300 for trimming a tree that the HOA later cut down entirely. The pattern was clear. The HOA wasn't a governing body. It was a racket, run by Valerie and her inner circle, squeezing homeowners while flipping stolen land into profit through shady LLCs. It was no longer just about me. It was about all of us. I made a decision right then. I wasn't just going to fight for my land. I was going to expose the entire rotten system, every forged document, every fake vote, every dollar they funneled. And now I had the proof, the motive, and the names. They thought I'd back down, but they didn't know what they'd just started. I thought I had them cornered. I had documents, company ties, forged signatures, all of it ready for court. But the moment I filed my complaint with the county and submitted evidence to my lawyer, the real war began. The next morning, I walked outside and found massive concrete barricades blocking my driveway. A neon orange sign was zip-tied to one of them. Private HOA work zone. No trespassing. My own driveway. I called the police, thinking this had to be illegal. They shrugged and said it was a civil matter, and I'd need to take it up with the HOA directly. That was the moment I realized Valerie wasn't done, she was retaliating. The next blow came fast. I got a notice slapped on my front door. 12 code violations, overgrown weeds, improper exterior paint, unpermitted structure, referring to the shed my grandfather built 20 years ago. Fines totaling over $3,800. Then my mailbox vanished, literally ripped from the ground. When I called the post office, they said the HOA had requested a cluster mailbox system for community consistency and had relocated mine. I didn't even get an address. That same week, my water was shut off. When I contacted the utility company, they said the account was transferred, and the HOA was listed as the new party responsible for communal utility coordination. They had somehow filed a utility consolidation request through their fake development branch. I had to haul water from a friend's place just to flush a toilet. Then the online smear campaign started. Someone created a fake neighborhood Facebook page and posted that I was harassing the HOA board and threatening volunteers. They uploaded pictures of me in my yard, taken without my knowledge, saying I was damaging community property. My neighbors started pulling away. Some were scared, others bought into the lies. One even yelled at me for trying to ruin things for everyone. I was completely cornered, cut off, isolated, villainized. Valerie was using every dirty trick in the book, weaponizing the HOA charter, bending municipal systems, using intimidation and bureaucracy to crush me without ever stepping foot in court. But here's the thing. Every move she made gave me more proof. Every false fine, every locked gate, every threat, it all built my case. She thought fear would silence me. Instead, it made me louder. They escalated, so I escalated back. This wasn't just a property dispute anymore. This was war. The day of the hearing felt like a final exam for a battle I never signed up for. The courtroom was cold, sterile, packed with HOA board members in smug formation, like a pack of wolves, dressed in business casual. Valerie sat front and center, her arms folded, chin slightly raised like she was already drafting her victory speech. My lawyer nudged me as we were called to the front. I stood, heart pounding, fingers gripping the edge of my folder like it was the last thing tethering me to sanity. The judge asked for opening remarks, and Valerie's attorney launched into a symphony of lies, claims of easements, consent forms, community interests, and how I was obstructing progress. She sat there nodding along like a queen watching her court do the dirty work. I could feel the eyes of the room shifting toward me, already dismissing me as some angry loner clinging to a pile of dirt. Then it was my turn. I didn't start with arguments. I started with a story. My grandfather's land, the survey markers, the day the bulldozers rolled in unannounced. I pulled out the photos, the concrete barricades, the fake violations, the mailbox theft. I read a quote from the utility company confirming the fraudulent account transfer. The judge raised an eyebrow. Then came the twist. I unfolded the original 1962 deed, signed, notarized, and clearly marking the boundaries that included every inch of the so-called community park. I placed it beside the current county GIS map and then added the most recent HOA development plans, ones they had filed using forged documents tied to Valerie's dummy LLC. I let the silence breathe, let the evidence hang there like thunder waiting to crack. Valerie's smirk began to twitch, and then I said it, clear and slow. You didn't just build a playground on my property. You built your house on my land. The room fell quiet. No, one moved. The judge leaned forward and said, "Is that verified?" My lawyer nodded. "Verified. And we have the chain of title to back it." Valerie's face turned pale. Her lawyer scrambled for a response, but it was over. The power dynamic in the room shifted instantly. I wasn't the nuisance anymore. I was the rightful owner, the one they tried to erase. The judge ordered an immediate injunction halting all HOA development activity on my property, pending further litigation. Valerie's expression shattered. For the first time in months, I could breathe. I didn't just win a case. I reclaimed everything they tried to steal. The courtroom buzzed with attention I hadn't expected. Valerie, the HOA president, and her attorneys sat there stunned as the judge ruled in our favor. The word injunction echoed in my ears, and I could barely comprehend that I had won. The reality of the moment didn't sink in immediately. It felt surreal, like I was still waiting for the hammer to drop. But it didn't. I had finally reclaimed my land. Walking out of that courtroom, I wasn't filled with anger or bitterness. I wasn't there to kick anyone out or ruin their lives. I had my land back. I had what was rightfully mine. But there was more to do now, more than just a victory. I had to make sure this never happened to anyone else. The first step was ensuring Valerie's hold on the HOA would never impact my property again. A few weeks after the hearing, I organized a community meeting. It was time to create a new vision for the future of this place, a vision where the land was respected, where everyone had a say, and where transparency was a given. I wanted to make sure no one could ever pull off something like this again, not in our community, not in my name. I stood at the front of the room surrounded by neighbors who had been quietly watching from the sidelines, unsure of how to act. Some of them had seen what happened and were furious but didn't know how to fight back. They listened to the story of how this all started, the bulldozers, the falsified documents, and the underhanded deals. They had no idea how deep the corruption ran, but now they did. They were all just as eager to get involved as I was. It wasn't easy, but we began the process of dissolving the old HOA. We formed a new one that worked for the people, not for personal gain. Valerie and her group were out. The new HOA was built on fairness and accountability. Each member had a clear, accessible vote, and everything, finances, developments, decisions, was open to the public. I wanted transparency. I wanted a place where everyone could feel like they belonged. Most of all, I wanted to be sure that the community's values weren't sold out for the sake of power or money. In the months that followed, we started to make some much-needed changes. The land that had been the center of the dispute was now open and protected, preserved for the future, where families could gather, where children could play. It wasn't just a victory for me. It was a victory for everyone who lived here. The community began to thrive in ways it hadn't in years, and a sense of pride spread through the neighborhood. The land was not only mine, it was ours. But the real victory came when I realized what this battle had done for me personally. It wasn't just about legal papers or land deeds. It was about resilience. It was about finding the strength to stand up when everyone else would have folded, to fight when it seemed like all the odds were stacked against me. The most unexpected part of the whole experience was the transformation it triggered within me. I had always thought of myself as someone who avoided conflict, someone who liked to stay under the radar. But fighting for what was mine, for what was right, turned me into someone I barely recognized, a person capable of changing the course of my future. Looking around at my neighbors, I knew I had done something bigger than myself. We didn't just win a court case. We had reclaimed our sense of justice, our community, and our trust in one another. Valerie's grip on the neighborhood had been nothing more than a facade. Her lies and manipulation had torn us apart. But in the end, we had built something stronger, something that would last. I didn't just want my land back. I wanted the peace that came with knowing I had done everything I could to preserve it. I wanted the generations after me to look at that land with respect and pride, knowing the history of the fight it took to protect it. That's when it hit me. This was bigger than just winning a legal battle. This was about the impact we had on the people around us. It was about creating a legacy of fairness, of community, and of respect for the land that supported us. This was my victory, but it was also a victory for every single person who had a stake in this community, who cared about what was right, who fought for what they believed in. And as I walked through the neighborhood, seeing the children playing on the land that was once in danger of being stolen, I knew it was all worth it. The road hadn't been easy. The emotional toll had been heavy, but every step had led me to this moment, a moment of peace, a moment of pride. Justice had been served, not just for me, but for everyone who believed in standing up for what was right. The fight wasn't just about reclaiming land, it was about reclaiming my own voice, my own power. And now, with that victory behind me, I could look to the future, knowing I had made a difference. Just as I was breathing a sigh of relief, thinking the fight was finally over, I received a strange phone call. The voice on the other end was calm but ominous, saying, You've won nothing. We'll be back, and this time you won't win." I froze. Who was this person, and how did they know everything? It was clear that the battle had just taken a new, terrifying turn. I don't know what comes next, but one thing's for sure. This story is far from over. If you're as invested in seeing what happens next as I am, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next twist. And hey, drop your thoughts in the comments. What would you do if you found yourself in my shoes? Let's talk about it.